taking your time. I know it's an hour out of your diaries, but hopefully we can keep you busy and perhaps impart some interesting and up-to-date information around the drone industry, specifically with a view to weaving some of the insurance terminology and coverages into that discussion. But I'm excited about this because it's actually really a practical session, and we're going to hear from one of our specialist brokers how you manage the process, the client side, the claim side, and then very importantly, we're going to talk ops today, the actual managing of the drones in a commercial environment, which is fantastic. So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our three panelists. First of all, from iTOO, our underwriting specialist, Kopano Tholo, who's going to kick off, and he's going to give us a little bit of a background and perhaps a little refresher for some of you who were with us in September as to what the policy covers. I'm going to ask Daniel Blomerus, who's an absolute specialist in this industry from a broking point of view, to give us his point of view as to how the client interactions take place, what to look for, what to consider if you're actively managing a client in this environment, and also a nice touch with some claims management process, and he'll give us an example or two of that. And then we're going to finish very interestingly with Grant Tyson from Droneops. Grant is the head of growth and sales for Droneops. And why this is actually fascinating is because I think this will really give a lot of you insight into what's going on in the way that drone activity in the industry is evolving. We did decide that throwing mining into the discussion today was probably going to be too much. And so Grant will talk things like security, surveillance, search and rescue, and some fascinating stories that he's been involved in. And we look forward to hearing from Grant on that. So, you know, from an iTOO point of view, we've been involved in the drone industry for some time now. The wonderful approach of iTOO is generally has an entrepreneurial flair about the growth potential in those areas. And we have been tracking the growth in drones in particular since 2016, 2017. And we found, notwithstanding the COVID pandemic, that the growth has been phenomenal and continues to go like that. So we're very encouraged by that. And I think, you know, Kopano will give testimony to the fact that we're actually very busy at the moment. So keep those requests coming from all of you brokers out there. We appreciate the support. And I'm going to turn to Kopano now and ask him just to unpack a little bit about what the iTOO UAV policy covers and give us a little bit of a refresher and a reminder as to what that does, why that's important. You will see it weaves through the content that we'll give you for the balance of the hour. So sit back and enjoy, and thanks for joining us once again. Cops, perhaps I can ask you to join us on screen and take over.
Right. Thanks a lot, Greg, and thanks a lot to Tammy for the lovely introduction. Good morning to everyone once again. And as Greg mentioned, I'll just be taking you through, obviously, what the iTOO policy covers. So in this policy, the iTOO drones commercial policy, we've got three sections, which I'll be going through. So what does the iTOO UA Unmanned Aerial Vehicle policy cover? We've got our first section. I'll just move a little bit with the slides. So section 1 of our cover covers for physical loss or damages to the unmanned aerial system, which is the drone itself. So we'll cover you for any physical loss to your drone or any damages of the drone itself during the period of insurance for any activities covered under your policy. We'll cover your drone whilst it is in flight, whilst it is on the ground or in transit. So for instance, your operations are you're moving from your office space and you're moving to an off-site operation place, and something happens to your car, you are hijacked, you will be covered in our policy. If you're flying your drone and a bird strike happens, your policy will be covered in our policy. If you lose your drone whilst in operations, you will be covered in this section of the cover. Section 2 speaks to the physical loss or damages to the unmanned aerial system, which is your payload or any spares. So we'll also cover you in this section for any physical loss or any damages during the period of insurance, being it your own property or the properties of others whilst in your care and custody and control. So if you, for instance, sometimes some clients we would get, there's certain operations which need different kinds of scanners or thermal scanners or different kinds of cameras. And you know an operator who has one and you'd like to rent it out from that user. You can be able to get cover in our policy, and we will cover you whilst it is in your care, custody and control, whilst on the ground, whilst in flight, and also whilst in transit to your operation. Section 3 of our cover speaks to the legal liabilities to any third parties. So we will pay for you or on behalf of you for any sum insured, or if you are held legally liable for any bodily injury, property damages, invasion of privacy, or any noise liability will be covered under the section of cover. To extend, the section of cover also covers any third-party war liability. So in terms of third-party war liability, we'll cover any riots. So if there's a riot, and obviously probably you're doing security or you're doing crowd pulling, and your drone is people try to stone it down, it will be covered in this section of our cover. So those are the 3 sections which we have covering in our policy, which speaks to which each section speaks to the assets of the drone itself, and any liabilities which might occur whilst in operations will be covered in our policy. To move along, we'll also notify you of any flight rules which we see as important for us, for any client that we have with us. So the required documentation that you'd need to have cover is a pilot needs to have a valid remote pilot's license, a certified copy of the RPAS operating certificate, and an operational specification. So normally we'd call that an ROC. You need an ROC in order for you to operate. So you'd need to be licensed in order to operate in the South African airs. A certified copy of each drone remote piloted aircraft letter of approval. So your drone itself needs to be registered with the Civil Aviation Authority, and we would need that letter of approval in order for us to be able to cover your drone. We've got pre-flight checks that we also we also would like clients to be aware of, and mostly pilots. So before you take off on your drone, pre-flight checks are the most important checks that you need to do. It's like a K53 check for your vehicle. You need to check certain things before you drive off. So for your drone, you'd need, the pre-flight checks are done to ensure that the equipment and the flying conditions are in an appropriate manner and an ideal state. So flight conditions, you'll be checking your temperatures and any weather conditions. For your equipment, you'll be checking, for instance, if your propellers are tightly screwed on, and if your battery life is full for you to be able to conduct any of those operations. The next one is pilot duties and responsibilities. So pilots are responsible for the safe operations of drones. The pilot is also responsible for operating the unmanned aerial vehicle in accordance with the operator's manual. Pilots are responsible for maintaining separation from any collision avoidance with any other aircrafts, obstacles, and any hazards, taking the right of provision into account. Pilots are also responsible for the safe piloting in a manner which minimizes any risk to persons, properties, or any other aircrafts which would be in the sky. The next one would be flights in the vicinity of public roads. So this is also an important flight rule, which we also have to note, because some people just think if I've got my drone, I can be able to operate over people or over public roads. So do not use your drone in public roads for takeoff or landing. Do not fly your drone over or along any length or distance of around about 50 meters from public roads unless the road has been closed and safety measures have been put in place for the safety operation. So only people who hold an RPAS operating certificate and are approved by the director in the operator's operation manual will be permitted to conduct such flight, as well as except when approved by the relevant local authority, you'll be able to operate in a public road. And then flights in the vicinity of people. Do not fly your drone overhead or within 50 meters lateral distance of an individual or group of people, unless those people are part of the operation and adequate safety measures have been put in place for those operations. However, people who hold an RPAS operating certificate and an approval from the director in the operator's operation manual are approved to operate in a vicinity of people. With reckless behavior, do not operate a drone in a negligent manner, partially, or endanger people or property or any aircraft in the vicinity. So always be aware of your operating environment and do not operate your drone in a reckless manner, which the drone is not conducted to operate. Thank you. So from our side, a saying that I have is people see drones in the sky. We see eyes in the sky, capturing moments from every single angle. Thank you for that. Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Kops. Excellent. And I guess for everyone listening out there that hasn't had any interaction with either a drone pilot or an operator who owns a company that has an ROC and is validly operating commercially for gain, there's a lot to consider. There's lots of acronyms, as you've heard, and can be quite confusing. But if you start to understand it slowly, appreciate that what we're dealing with is not recreational drones flying in the back garden. We're talking about commercial drones being operated potentially in and around controlled airspace, and obviously never in, but the potential for that exists, which is why the liability is a compulsory aspect. Now, importantly, Kopano has given us a little bit of the groundwork and I guess the legalese around that, and I'm going to ask Daniel, who I'd like to acknowledge today as one of the leading specialists in the country in this area, who's recently been invited to write a chapter in a book that's been released, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, just to give us the practical handling of this with the clients that are coming onto the books in terms of the new ROCs, and also what can go wrong in these contexts. So Daniel, if you can give us your view on these things, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. If we can just put on my camera here, Thabo. I think everybody would like to see my face. So I'm just going to carry on. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Greg, and your team. As you mentioned, my name is Daniel Blumeres. I'm from Unicorn Insurance Brokers. We're based in the heart of South Africa, Blue Bull country, as we all know it, Pretoria. And yeah, I've been asked by iTOO to just give you some inside info regarding how do they calculate the risk and how do they process the claims. It's not how can I say, it's not that everybody knows or hasn't seen a drone, but the biggest thing that everybody fears is the data that gets captured from the drone. And for that reason, we want to mention, sorry guys, I'm just going to stop there. Tove is checking here. Is my video on then? I believe everything's fine.
Yes, it is, Daniel.
Okay, thanks, Tove. All right, great. So from our side, what we want to just tell you guys, and to get back to my story, is to explain you and give you some little insight about what we do with the data that gets collected from the drone. It's very important that people understand, with all the regulations and everything set out by the South African Civil Aviation Authority, yes, a lot of these guys have a lot of responsibility in the industry and have spent a lot of years, not months, but years, getting that certificate. Some of our operators in the industry, as you heard, Droneops, who on Tyson will give us a brief overview of what they do. They spent up to 2 to 3 years to receive this registered operator certificate. And with that comes a lot of responsibility for the pilot, as well as for the operator, to make sure that the pilots are well inducted into their company, as well as have the proper licenses in place for operations of their nature. So in a case where you look at a standard facility, or you look at a standard operator, it's not just getting the license, getting your operator certificate or ROC, and pitching your drone, pushing it to full throttle and flying. There's a lot of regulation that you still require doing certain operations. So in a situation where you do security flights, we all know the biggest crime in South Africa comes at night. So for these guys, they need specific ratings. They need to have a night operations rating. They need to also look at beyond visual line of sight operations. Beyond visual line of sight means that they can fly further than 500 meters. And for all of this, to gather all that credentials and qualifications, it takes time, it costs money, and I've got a lot of respect for these guys that went through the process. For all terms and for explaining my presentation, everything based around my presentation will be according to commercial operators and not for recreational operators. We have a large amount of recreational operators in South Africa, and I actually want to just elaborate on that to say that there are insurers out there that will look at this, but for iTOO's purposes, they are specialists in the field, and the product that they have is designed and built for the commercial operator. So for a guy that's got all his platforms and qualifications in place, it's definitely to look for a commercial insurer instead of a recreational operator. So we all know fear sells. So for my case study, I'm going to use an example of a process claim that we had in 2019. For all relevant factors, I cannot mention the operator or mention the pilot, but I can show you some inside info of the information that we gathered and the data that we actually used from the drone. So yes, it is true, there is a lot of data on the drone, and we use that data to determine the risk, as well as actually see what happened in a case of an accident. So for this case study, we're going to look at an RPL pilot that was flying under an approved ROC. As we said, ROC is a registered operator certificate given by the SACAA. They were filming a music video in Hillbrow, Johannesburg. We all know music videos or movies are all set to be the most fantastic shots and the most outrageous movements of cameras and running around of people. So for a risk aspect, this is a dangerous scenario. It's very close quarter photography and filming. So the pilot had to have all his approvals in place to make sure that he can fly in the area that he was operating, as well as close to certain objects than normal. So with permission, you can go closer than 50 meters to any building or person. All right. So the drone on the right-hand side, which is unfortunately broken, as you can see, no, that is not how a DJI should look. Normally the camera is mounted on and it's very beautiful. But in this case, this is the actual footage or photo of the broken drone after an accident. So the drone in this picture is a Dgi Inspire 2. This is a very common drone that you'll see in the industry, and it gets used by a lot of photographers or production houses because it's got an interchangeable camera. The camera that was used on this specific drone was an X7 Zenmuse. It's got the capability to attach different lenses. So not only are we ensuring the drone, we are looking at the payload, which is the camera, as well as the lenses. From these lenses can start from 22,000 Rand, and in this case was 44,000 Rand just for the lens. It also comes with 2 batteries. Most of the drones built today most of the commercial drones, comes out with 2 batteries to power the drone. This just gives a little bit more redundancy for the drone. So should one of the batteries fail, the idea is that the drone will come down landing safely. But as we all know, scenarios happen and circumstances change. So as you can see, the battery didn't help, and it came down crashing. Luckily, we had no third-party damages. I'm not gonna. I said at the beginning of my speech, I said we're not gonna let's use fear to explain my example, but I want you guys to still sleep tonight, so we're not going to talk about third-party claims. But let's quickly just talk about it. Drones started out in the industry not because the guys wanted to insure their drones; they had to insure for third-party damages. This is the regulation set out by the SACAA. And this is the first requirement you as an operator would need. So a lot of your clients will contact you and ask you they need a confirmation of insurance for third-party liability. And with that saying, this is what they are actually asking for. The product was designed around the third-party liability because it's a requirement and it's regulated by the SACAA. The minimum requirement in South Africa is 500,000 Rand, but as we all know as brokers, 500,000 Rand is not going to even cover the lawyer's cost. So the minimum set or the minimum standard in the industry by most of the insurers is 2.5 million Rand. Okay, the claimed amount that we had here was 192,000 Rand. Thanks, Thabo. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so with this claim, as I said, I'm going to explain to you a scenario where we use a claim to process the data, and just to show you how we would look at a claim from the data, as well as if there's a claim, how do we know if this client was flying in controlled airspace, was he flying commercially, and how did he operate? So the first thing we're going to get is the claim form from the client, and he's also going to complete a pilot statement that in a case if there was a third-party accident would have been sent to the South African Civil Aviation Authority, because you have to register that claim with them. We're also going to ask for the remote pilot's license, where we're going to check if the pilot was approved to actually fly this specific drone. You get 2 classifications on an RPL license, where you're going to get the first one is a multi-rotor, and the second one is a fixed wing. With these 2 classifications, it's 2 totally different drones. So if the pilot was flying a drone that he was not accredited to fly, there would not be a claim. We're also then going to ask for the ROC. With this, we're going to check that the drone was registered under the ROC and that it was actually flying legally. With the area where the client stipulated on his claim form, we're going to check if it was in controlled airspace, and if so, we are going to ask for the SACAA approval to fly in that controlled airspace. The biggest point and the biggest factor that iTOO asks for in a claim situation, and most of the insurers ask for, is the flight log from the tablet or the drone. The reason I say tablet or drone, it is specific to if the drone is lost, the only way to gather the flight log is from the tablet. If we've got the drone and we are looking to repair it, we can still take it off the drone. All right. And then lastly, if it can be repaired, we are going to ask for the damage report from the repairer. So from the log, before Thabo presses play here, she started, but let's go. From the log, we can gather a KML file. A KML file is a keyhole markup file. It's a lot of jargon, but I just want to give you a background on what the process is we get. So with this KML file, we can literally get a geographical location on Google Earth to a pinpoint location to where the drone was flying. So as soon as Thabo presses play, you're going to see how the data takes us to the exact location where the drone was operating. So here you can see it's going closer into Joburg. We're close to Houghton Estate. If we go down, it's going to take us down to Brom Park. And that area, if everybody knows, is very close to Hillbrow Towers, close to Hillbrow. So from this data, you'll see there's a lot of activity on this. We can literally see the flight path of the pilot, how he was flying, what the altitude he was flying at, how far was he from any buildings or structures or people. In this case, you won't be able to see people, but we can see there's some parking lots at the bottom, so there will be cars or people in the vicinity. So we'll take that data to align to where the client was flying and to have an exact location. So there's no way that the insured can come to us and say, I was flying in Pretoria, but from the data we can find that he was actually in Hillbrow in this case. So on this log, you'll see there's a green light, and you'll also see there's a red light. The green light means the pilot's in complete control and he's flying up and down and taking his shots as a normal film photographer would do. The white spots or dots that you see, these are messages sent from the manufacturer, which in this case was DJI. So on their controller, it will give you some warning signs just to say your battery's on 99% or your battery's on 50%, or you've reached 30%, please go home. When red dots appear, that means that there's warning signals being sent from the drone. So the drone is literally giving you an indication to say, listen, something is wrong, I'm getting interference, and please watch out. In this case, if we go to the next slide, you'll see there's a red light. I think just click it again. There we go. So from this, as I said, we will then pinpoint the location. Okay, I'll go into the red line and the green line shortly. I just want to explain to you all the data that we can gather from this. So if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see there's a lot of dots in the Joburg vicinity. These are all no-fly zones that are set out by the civil aviation authorities across the world. So this specific app, which is UAV Forecast, for anybody that would like to know, this shows you the information from the drone and the areas where you may fly. Red dots are normally where big airports are. So the one on the right where you see Kempton Park, left you'll see Lanseria, and the one close there to Boksburg, I believe is Rand Airport, but I can be wrong. So these are literally no-fly zones. To get permission to fly there, you have to have the approval from the CAA and you have to have all the qualifications. The yellow dots that you see there are normally heliports, which are situated close to hospitals. And so that is a controlled airspace, and you still need to get permission to fly there and have to have the correct application to do so, or qualifications to do so. So in this situation, on the left-hand side, you'll see that the client was flying close to Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, and they've got a helipad for emergency let's say evacuations or flight. From the data, we can also then take the weather conditions. Sorry, Thabo, if you can just go one back. From the data, we can also check the weather conditions. So we can see what the wind speed was. From the manufacturer side, in this case DJI, they'll give you an example to say or they'll give you a maximum speed limit that the drone can fly in. So if the wind speed is more at that specific time, you cannot start your drone. Let's say, for instance, the maximum wind speed was 12 and at that miles per hour. And at that time, it was, let's say, 18 or 20 miles per hour. Some of the drones will tell you they are not going to take off, but some of them don't. So it's very important that the pilots look at this information to see if you've got if the weather conditions are fit to actually fly in this space. Okay, so then we're going to go to the data to find out what actually happened in the next slide. Thanks, Thabo. So right at the top, you'll see, as I mentioned, we've got a red dot there. So with that red dot message, it literally showed that there's strong wireless interference. Please fly with caution. If you look a little bit down until the white dot, there was a red line that showed the drone was not responding and it was not giving a signal back to the pilot. So that means to the controller. From that, we can then see that the red turned into green. So it meant that the drone either rebooted or regained signal and then tried to keep its flight path. But again, there was another red warning that came up and another red warning. And then after that, the data cut out and the drone came crashing down. So there was a large interference with the drone, and with our repairers and from the data that we captured, the only reason, the only thing that we could gather from this is that there was a microwave beam that was shot out or being sent through internet, how can I say, Wi-Fi connections, not your standard router, but I'm talking about big microwave activity. And this actually fried the brain, if we can say it like that, from the drone. It lost total signal, and it was just scrambling the brain, and the drone couldn't gain control of it. The pilot tried to regain control, but right at the bottom, if you remember my previous slide, it showed a small green portion right at the bottom. So it meant that the drone switched off or lost signal, regained signal, lost signal again, but with gravity, unfortunately, being the reason for all drone crashes, the drone came down too fast, and when it gained control, it was too late. So the drone came down, it was crashed, and yeah, we could luckily repair it. Unfortunately for the camera and the lens, it had to be replaced because of the sensitivity of the lenses. But in this case, iTOO paid the total claim, and we gathered the information from the data that we received from the drone to actually analyze the data and see what happened and what the cause of the situation was. So with that being said, drones aren't scary. Drones are amazing. But without the safety first aspect, they can be very dangerous. I want to ask you as brokers and game setters and professionals in the industry, sorry, to look out for your clients and to ask the right questions. It's very important that a lot of people know that you have to have the proper training and the proper licenses in place to fly a drone in South Africa. And if you do, it's fantastic to be in airspace. Thank you very much, Greg.
No, thank you very much. That's excellent. And that's actually a lovely detailed explanation of how one gets to a point where the practical application of the policy applies. Nice to know that there was a good ending to this in context, and that's what the insurance was there to do. I'm conscious of the time, and Grant, I know, can speak and speak a lot. He warns me, and has got lots to tell us. So I want to get straight into it and look at this from an operational, commercial operator's point of view. And Grant in particular is going to tell us a little bit about one of his passions, which is search and rescue, and also a little bit about what Droneops do in the surveillance and security space. So Grant, if you're ready to share your screen, I know Candice is there to help. You guys can take over the controls. while you're doing that, I think also there's a couple of questions which we'll get to at the end if time allows. Alternatively, if we run over too much, what we'll do is we'll collate those and either answer them next week, or alternatively, we'll put together a little short email to everyone in explanation. I know there were some questions about the riots and strikes and third-party war liability, etc., etc.
Fantastic.
Grant, you ready?
Thabo, if I can ask you to give me sharing rights, please, I can share my screen. I'd really appreciate it.
Hi, Grant, we're busy sorting it out.
So while we wait for that, I think importantly, and just to reiterate a little bit, some of the key things that you as brokers should be asking clients if you are approached. I mean, if you're not familiar with this, please reach out and we can always help, or give some guidance if you're not sure. But importantly, understand that the people looking for cover are either a qualified RPL or ROCs, or are working with people who are ROCs. So that's an important question right up front, and then we can get to it. Right, Grant, are you ready to go?
Ready to, can everyone see my screen?
We can, yes. There's lots of colorful stuff going on there. There we go.
Excellent. Right, how's that?
That's great. We're seeing the Droneops
Fantastic.
page.
Right. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see such a nice audience that's attending these chats, and actually nice to see some familiar names and faces. Kath and Albertine, good to see you on the call. Haven't seen you for a while, so hopefully you guys all enjoy what I've got to say. My name's Grant Tyson. I am the group head of growth for Droneops as an organization, and Droneops was regionally started probably 2015 and in the drone market, and is a commercial enterprise drone operator. We provide a lot of drone services, and we provide a lot of services to organizations in corporate South Africa. So, right, what is an ROC? I mean, you've heard in some of the other presentations what an ROC is. It's a remote operator certificate. What does that mean? It's pretty much like an airline's operating certificate. So the major differences: we are unmanned. There's no pilot sitting in that little drone flying around at night or during the day during operations. And in the manned aviation, it is the airline with a pilot sitting behind the flight sticks, and he operates that aircraft, and he makes sure that it flies in the correct airspace, the correct direction, and he lands it and takes off without causing any damage or crashing the aircraft. So hopefully we don't do much of that. But if you do, that's why you've got these insurance companies that are backing you and supporting you. So that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So,
Right. Sorry, one sec. Can we ask you to please put your camera on?
Sure. Apologies. Okay.
Thank you.
No worries. Let's see. Right, I'm going to have to quickly just end that and then put the camera on. Give me one sec. Start video. There we go. How's that?
Perfect, perfect.
Fantastic. Now you can see my ugly mug. Can you still see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Here we go. Okay. Right. So what does this mean? So, for us to be able to operate in situations and with clients and in corporate South Africa, we provide a whole bunch of services. We need to make sure that we've got an ROC. We need to make sure that we've got licensed pilots to be able to operate these aircraft. You need to have a fleet of aircraft. You need to have a fleet of aircraft that are able to fly and do certain things and perform certain tasks. Because we're we're operating in the security industry, you need to be CIRA accredited. You need to know that. And CIRA accreditation is very interesting accreditation, because there's a lot of the drone organizations and drone commercial companies that are out there don't necessarily have the CIRA accreditation. But CIRA dictates that if you are operating a screen, or you're even looking at a CCTV camera system for surveillance purposes, even if you're changing a lock in a secure environment, you need to be CIRA accredited. So Droneops as an organization is CIRA accredited. All our pilots and our payload operators are all CIRA accredited. And then obviously, to be able to operate within certain large state-owned entities and corporations, we need to be a good BE level. So this obviously is all part of some of the authorizations that we need to have in place to make sure that we can deliver the services that we have. So when I talk about a fleet and an aircraft, our workhorse is very much the workhorse of our fleet. Let me see why it's not changing to the next slide. There we go. This is the M300. It's a DJI aircraft. It's what they call a Matrice 300, M300 RTK. It is literally a workhorse. Some of the specs of this aircraft, it's got a very good flying time. Obviously, in ideal conditions, it's up to 55 minutes of airtime, which is quite a bit more than your average drone that you can purchase out there. It's got certain capabilities in terms of payload. It can take some very interesting and exciting payloads, the payload being the camera systems or the mapping systems or the LiDAR systems, whatever application you utilize in the drone for, it'll be able to take that payload. It is IP45 rated, means you can fly in some light drizzle and light rain. You can fly in some relatively high wind speeds, and they talk about 15 meters per second, which is 50 odd kilometers an hour in wind speed. So it's a very capable aircraft. Some of the payload in terms of what we utilize from a security perspective is what we call a Zenmuse H20T. It's a very, very capable camera system. It's got 3 cameras on it, in fact. It's got a zoom camera, it's got a wide angle camera, and then it's also got a thermal camera for nighttime operations. So you've got infrared thermal imagery that you could utilize for the nighttime security operations. Very capable aircraft. Hot swappable batteries, that means you don't have to shut the aircraft down. You can land it, swap the batteries out while it's still idling, if you can call it that, take off and carry on with operations. Quite important when you're looking at security type operations. It is also one of the newer aircraft where it gives you the ability that if there's, for example, a prop failure or an engine failure or what they call a rotor failure, that aircraft can land on 3 propellers, which is quite nice. I'm sure Daniel will be very happy to hear that. We won't be crashing any of these aircraft in the very near future. So some of the areas that we talk about or that we operate in, we've got 3 probably strategic pillars that we operate in. One of the most important and one of the biggest demands that we're seeing coming out of corporate South Africa at the moment is aerial security. Aerial security, surveillance, anything related to protecting infrastructure, overwatch, etc., etc. We've got another vertical that we look after or that we play in, and that's the power line inspection, power inspection, that's solar panels, solar farms, wind farms, etc. And then one of our traditional businesses, which is the mining sector, where we do blast analysis, surveying, mapping, etc. So those are 3 very important verticals in our business as a commercial enterprise operator. The aerial security, though, or the security leg, if you call it that, is probably one of the biggest demands that is coming out in the industry at the moment. We're getting more and more requests on a day-to-day basis for aerial security, for customers and corporations that are looking to protect their infrastructure, to be able to give them information, viable information to make informed decisions on how they go forward and how they protect their equipment, how they protect their land, their infrastructure, etc. So I'm going to go through a couple of quick videos here, and this will give you an idea of what type of operations and how the operations actually roll out and how they conduct themselves in the evenings. You can have daytime security, you can have nighttime security. So if you look at, for example, this, let me go back there, this video here, it is quite important in the sense that the capability of this workhorse, this Matrice, the M300, it's got some fantastic functionality. What's happening in this video now, you'll see there's a lock onto that vehicle. It's called active track, and it has the ability from a static location without moving and utilizing the actual payload or the camera to actively track that aircraft or that motor vehicle. Whether it's a motor vehicle or whether it's a person, active track is one of the features within the DJI M300, and it is very good to have that functionality when you're tracking someone. They say that it can move up to speeds of okay, I don't know what's happening there. Seems like someone has control of my presentation. There we go. Let's get back
Sorry,
there.
are you still on the same slide? We've seen the M300 RTK. It hasn't gone through to the videos.
Okay, let's see. I wonder why that's happening. So what I'm going to do quickly, I'm just going to end the stop the share and then let's reshare it again just to make sure, because I believe we are not seeing. Right, let's see that. If you can tell me what you're seeing now. What can you see on my screen there, Candice?
Just says Grant Tyson has started sharing screen. It hasn't come through.
Okay. Tove, and are you seeing something different?
No, the same, Grant.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm chatting away and you're not seeing my screen. Okay, so what I'll do, let me stop that share again. And let's stop that. Right. Okay. Let's go share screen. Desktop 1. Okay, what can you see now?
Your desktop screen.
Ah, what is going on?
Would you like me to share from my side and then
And
I
there,
can
how's
run?
that?
Yes, there we go. 100%.
Ah, beautiful. See, this is what's so amazing about technology. When it works, it's wonderful. When it doesn't work, then the demo gods come out and give you lots of problems. But hopefully we won't have any more glitches going forward. Right. Okay, so you can all see the screen where there's a picture of a vehicle and looks like a target and the vehicles are moving. Is that?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Right, so as I was saying earlier, you might have heard the the explanation, but not necessarily seen the screen. So some of the capabilities of this aircraft, it's got a fantastic payload, which is the Zenmuse H20T. The digital camera has got the ability to activate what they call active tracking, which is where you're locking onto a vehicle. You can lock onto an individual or a suspect or whatever the case is, whether it's day or night. And I'll show you in the next video, you'll see. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see what they call an image of what the actual camera is seeing. So if you were at that particular height and you were looking through your normal vision, that's what you'd be able to see. And you can see the difference now between the image on the bottom right versus the image of the vehicle where the vehicle is being tracked by the camera. That is utilizing the active track and the zoom camera of that aircraft. Very, very capable aircraft, very good for security surveillance and public safety type exercises. Right, the next video is you'll see what they call the thermal imagery. So this is running a thermal camera. It's one of the cameras that are on the H20T. It's same situation. You've got active track, you're tracking a vehicle. You can see it's almost like you in daylight. But if you look at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, it doesn't have the FPV view there, but it gives you the ability to see things at night. The clarity of this Zenmuse H20T camera is unbelievable. It's got a 30 hertz refresh rate in terms of thermal imagery. It's got a 640 by 512 resolution. Now that might not mean a lot to everyone, but if you look at how the technology has evolved from thermal imagery, you could almost see the picture, the suspect's face. The clarity is so good, you can identify a person with the thermal imagery. That's how good the camera capability has got over the years. So this is aerial security from a different perspective. The next slide. Let me just make sure everyone's seeing the same picture as me. There's a map and a vehicle top right-hand corner.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic. So it's no more glitches, thank goodness. So if you look at this image now, this is a different view for a command and control for an operator perspective. If you look at the middle of the screen, it says the M300 RTK. So that's where the aircraft is based on that overview map. If you see that little cross that is moving up and down on the right-hand side, that's the actual vehicle that's being tracked. So you could sit at quite a distance away and you can actually track a vehicle or a suspect from quite a distance without him even knowing that you're there, or without the vehicle even knowing that you're tracking them. Because of the capability of the zoom camera and the technology, you can follow that and make sure that you follow that suspect or that vehicle to a point where you can give ground forces or ground response teams, as in mobile reaction officers in security companies. You can give them the location and you can tell them exactly where that vehicle is going, where he's traveling and where he's heading off. So you can almost plan the arrest or the stopping of that vehicle with the resources that you've got at hand. Having aerial overwatch from a security surveillance point of view is incredibly powerful. You've got data that you can make very informed decisions about on where the suspects are. You've got different views, you've got different mapping that you can have as an overlay in your view that you can present back to the mobile response teams, etc. One of the features of this actual camera system, of this payload, the H20T, is it's got a digital rangefinder. So the minute you lock onto a target, whether it's active track or it's a static target, you can give the exact coordinates of exactly where that person is or that vehicle is. And if it's moving, the coordinates will update as the vehicle moves. So you take those coordinates and you can either buy a pin drop or whatever resources the mobile response teams have got on the ground, share that location with them so they know exactly where to go and how to where to get to this criminal to either arrest them or question them or inspect and find out what's going on. So surveillance work is fantastic. What we're finding in South Africa, a lot of the surveillance work that's happening in the evenings is all at night. It's typically when a lot of our crime activities happen, and having the ability to see in the dark, literally, and have night vision is a game changer. You can have the ability to create scenarios where the criminals don't know you're there and they don't know when you're coming either. So it's very valuable. If we look at the next picture, this is slightly different. It's more of a daytime view. What it does, it gives you the ability to pre-plan a flight. So if you have a look at what's happening in the picture now, in the video, you can pre-plan that actual flight route. So just to create a bit of confusion, if there's anyone that's aware you're in the air and they know you're flying, they won't know necessarily where you're going to be flying next. So you create the different waypoints, and when the aircraft flies, it follows that exact mission that you've planned. So this is all about pre-planning and mission planning. The success of a lot of nighttime operations or security operations is around the planning. If you plan properly, you've got a better chance of potentially catching any of the criminals that attempt to try and break in or steal infrastructure or whatever the case is. Another, what else is happening here, it's actually taking a photograph of the area so it understands what the area looks like. If there's ever changes, as an example, there's built-in AI analytics in the aircraft with some of these payloads. The next time you fly that same pattern and that same grid, it will tell if there's any differences. Say, for example, there was a tower or a piece of infrastructure in the area one day, the next day it will highlight that that piece of infrastructure is no longer there. So it's quite nice for Daniel when he comes along and he says, okay, let me see where this aircraft has been. These aircraft have got their own little black boxes, if you want to, from an understanding point of view, like a big manned aviation, everyone talks about the black box. It's got its own logs. It's got its own black box. He has the ability to pull that entire flight path, the altitude the aircraft was traveling at, the altitude, the distance, the speed, the hover time, the time in the air, and the exact location of where that aircraft flew, to the point where it can actually plot it out in the map, like Daniel showed you earlier in his previous in his earlier presentation. So I'm going to move over to something that's of great interest to me. I'm very passionate about search and rescue. I volunteer for a search and rescue organization, and I was very fortunate in 2019, prior to that in Malawi with the floods, to have participated in a big search and rescue mission where the off-road rescue unit joined up forces with Gift of the Givers, and we put a team out into Mozambique when Cyclone Idai hit. Cyclone Idai, we're talking about 110 miles per hour wind speeds. In kilometers, that's anywhere up to 160. If I say 160 kilometers was probably the bottom end of the scale. We had situations where the wind speeds were so high, it was blowing infrastructure. So if you think of a cell phone tower that are based on some roofs of buildings and things, some of those batteries and that equipment in excess of tonnage, it was blown off of the roofs. So Beira, unfortunately, was hit quite hard. It was carrying a lot of water, Cyclone Idai. It was carrying an immense amount of water that it dumped when it came through. As Cyclone Idai moved through, it moved up into the channels, up through Mozambique and up into Zimbabwe, and it caused havoc in Zimbabwe as well. And when it got to Zimbabwe, it dumped all the water that it collected on the way, it dumped it down in Zimbabwe. And with all that water, it's got to head to the sea, and it came back down into Mozambique. So it caused quite a bit of chaos and destruction. And if you understand, and if you've ever been to Mozambique, they're subsistence farmers. They people that live from hand to mouth. So, for them to lose everything is quite a big deal. We put together teams and we had a whole lot of infrastructure, and we had a whole lot of equipment that we took with us. And you can see here at the border posts and getting ready, we had boats with us. We had a big mobile command post, big trailer that we had drones with us. Now, people think, well, what are you going to do with a drone in the search and rescue? It can't go and fetch people. It can't do things. But drones are very, very important when it comes to search and rescue. It gives you eyes in the sky. It gives you the ability to deploy quickly, get something up in the air and understand what your surroundings are. If you understand what your surroundings are, you know what equipment you need to use, you know how to get to people, you know what the surrounding areas look like. Is it muddy? Is it bushy? Can you drive there? Do you need a boat? Do you need a helicopter, et cetera, et cetera? The helicopters come, and the big forces like United Nations and the guys like Red Cross, they do come and help. The problem is those are big wheels, those are big corporates, those are big corporate machines, and it takes time to get those big wheels rolling. In the meantime, people are losing their lives, people are washing down the rivers, they're stuck in trees, they've also got, they've lost everything. They've lost all their food, the crops that they grow and they survive off of and they live off of, everything is washed away. So if you have a look at this map here now, in the top right-hand corner, you can see where Beira is, and that cyclone Dgi moved in off the Madagascan coast through Beira, and if you follow all the way through to the left-hand side of the screen is a little town called eThekwini. eThekwini was probably one of the highest pieces of land that we could gain access to. We were the only rescue team and the rescue organization to get to the middle of the disaster zone. In that area is the merging of two big rivers. It's the Buzi River and it's I forget the other name, it's a Portuguese name, apologies. The two big rivers that merge and meet, that come down from Zimbabwe, bringing down a lot of water. And when the water comes down, it washes and it floods. What used to be a 40-meter wide river, in some places down in the floodplains, is now 40 kilometers wide. So very important to have visibility, to understand where you are, what you've got around you, what access you've got. So what the drones do for us as a quick deploy, you can whip out a drone quickly, you can get it up in the air and you can see what the surrounding areas look like. The drones give us the ability to understand where we need to launch boats, bearing in mind that what used to be a village is now underwater. And as the water starts subsiding, so for the first 3 days, as an example, you need to get these boats in, you need to get into the water so you can start pulling people out of the trees and out of the water, etc., quite urgently and quite quickly. So your first 3 days of a rescue mission are typically what they call search and rescue. You're looking for people, you're rescuing people out of trees. A very funny story, interesting story. It's not really funny, but we find a lot of bicycles up in trees. So now when you're in a poor nation like that and you've got a bicycle, you're quite a senior guy in the village, and a bicycle gives you the access to actually travel between villages and to be able to trade. So here's a businessman. So when you find a bicycle in the tree, just know that that man is relying on his business and he's keeping his bicycle with him up in the tree to make sure that when the water subsides, he's still got a mode of transport and he can still trade and do business between the different villages in these rural areas. So very interesting, but you'll have your whole family up in the tree with his bicycle. So that was quite interesting. Once we determined with the drones where we could launch, and bearing in mind, as the water starts subsiding, what used to be able to be navigable by a boat, you can't necessarily do that anymore. So the drones gave us the ability to find routes through some of the bush area, along some of what used to be roads, to get the boats and the jet skis, etc., down to the water. Because once you've got vehicle or boats on the water, you have the ability to get to people, you have the ability to get to the high-lying little islands, and there's lots of little islands, and these get seen from the drone. So when you've got some very capable drone technology, you can get anywhere up to 15 kilometers, 10 kilometers away from the pilot itself. So it means you can cover quite a bit of ground. Once you understand what the surrounding areas look like and where the high grounds are, where the people are stranded, then you can get the boats in and you can start directing them and getting them to the people to either rescue them or to supply food. So I mentioned the first 3 days was all the search and rescue. Thereafter, it became about humanitarian aid distribution, keeping people alive while the likes of Red Cross and United Nations got going and then got to your position. Because this was almost the epicenter where all the water came down, there was a lot of devastation here, a lot of flooding, quite a few medical scenarios where people obviously with the high winds and water moving and washing tin roofs and things like that, there was a lot of lacerations, a lot of amputations of feet and toes and all sorts of funny things because they're in the water and they're trying to avoid all this rubble and stuff coming down the water. Then they had to contend with, unfortunately, with crocodiles and hippos and all sorts of funny things. So very, very humbling experience. But we were extremely successful. Let me put it this way. While we were there, we didn't think we were that successful because we didn't think we got enough food, and we couldn't do enough. We couldn't get to enough people. But when you sit back and you look at what we managed to achieve as an organization, and it's purely because of, number one, training, and number two, having the right equipment with you and having the ability to communicate. So once you've got a drone, you've got an understanding of what the environment looks like. You can then set up communications between ourselves and Biro via two-way radios, via satellite, whatever we've got in our command post. And then you can start requesting the relevant resources. In situations like this where you can't get to it via boat because now the water's subsided, it's pure mud. You can't drive there because your vehicle will not even make 2 meters. You need helicopters. Working with Gift of the Givers is absolutely phenomenal because what happens is they will provide you with whatever you need. If I needed helicopters, they provided helicopters. But now we know where to send the helicopters. Now we know where to send the helicopters with medical resources, with the doctors, with food, with medical aid, where the local doctors in it, or the local nurses in the little villages can help and treat some of the patients. So, but it's all about information. What do you do with that information? How you utilize it? And this is where drone technology comes into play. So while this is playing in the background, I'll give you a little bit more around so this was the BBC feed, and it'll give you an idea of what some of the, what it looked like. And, you know, for a nation that had lost everything in that particular area, they are very humble people. They will still, with all of look at some of that flood area there. So what used to be 40 meters wide, look at it's now 40 kilometers wide. And you'll see, how do you get there with a vehicle? Some of these places you can't even get there with a boat. But what the drone gives you, it gives you the ability to start navigating and guiding the bigger resources where they need to go. Some areas, obviously little islands, there was nothing, but at least we could eliminate those areas. So you start searching areas where you can. You'll see now, this is typically next to a road. It becomes high ground. That's the Boozy area. That's the Boozy police station, funnily enough, and their little stadium. Guys are sitting on walls, etc., etc. So, you know, what does drone capability do for you in a search and rescue scenario? It does a lot. It does an incredible amount of information. It shares a lot of information. It gives you the ability to make informed decisions. It gives you enough information to where to deploy your resources, because you don't have an endless number of resources. You've got enough people there that work with you in your small teams. Where do you send them? Where do you triage to? Who do you go and see first? And unfortunately, if we could, we'd see everyone, but you need to make sure you get to the disaster zones and have the biggest effect with the amount of people you've got working with you, and with the technology, you can make those decisions. So I'm going to end it off there. There's my QR code. Scan it if you want to have a chat, if you want to know anything about what we offer. We are an enterprise drone company. There's our details on the right-hand side. If there's any questions, please feel free to answer. But I know Candice will be managing the Q&A side for us if you've got any questions. Drone technology, from an enterprise and commercial point of view, if you've got any customers out there that have certain requirements and services that they require utilizing drone technologies, reach out, give us a shot. We'll see how we can help you. We obviously focus on commercial stuff. We don't focus on the consumer side of things. But this is just I thought, an interesting talk about where you can utilize the technology, how you can use that flying camera, because ultimately that's what it is, to capture enough data to make informed decisions.
Grant, thank you very much. It's I'm conscious of the time for everybody, but fascinating insight into the use of drones. Thank you very much. I know these are possibly two sides of the spectrum, one being security, catching perpetrators, the other being rescuing people and actually bringing people back to safety. So that's vital. So guys, I'm conscious that we have run out of time. There are a couple of questions which we will respond to. And Simon, I'll give you a shout in respect of your model aircraft scenario. Unfortunately, it doesn't get covered on our commercial operators policy, but you know, let's see whether we can come up with a solution. We need to hear a little bit about those circumstances. And Tammy, perhaps over to you. We have a little draw or something if we've got some time. But to Grant, to Daniel, and to Kopano, thank you very much for your insights today, guys. That was excellent. Much appreciated.
Gents, it was very, very interesting, and thank you to you, Greg. We are, like Greg said, we're very aware that there are a lot of questions, and we will answer you guys directly or in next week's session. So please make sure to join us again. We are going to do the lucky draw. Thabo is busy formulating it here for us. We'll do that in 2 seconds. But if you need to jump off, please do. We are very wary of time, and we might make a plan to do one again next week. And meanwhile, if there's anyone that would like just to say a quick hi, please feel free to do so. You all are able to put your cameras on and unmute yourselves, and maybe just give us a nice little wave. Thabo, should we do it next week? Okay, we'll do 1 hour. If you guys are willing to be patient, we'll do a quick lucky draw. Greg, I don't know if you maybe want to choose one question that maybe stood out for you that we could maybe answer while we wait. Not to put you on the spot. You are on mute. There you go.
Okay, you got me. Okay, I think the model aircraft one is an interesting one. Scenarios that we do get presented with, for example, are a drone club at a school, not dissimilar to that kind of association or model aircraft association. And I think, clearly our policy, as we've all discussed today, is aimed at the commercial operators, regulating all of the activity through the process from the pilot right through. And that's what the intention is. But obviously there's a broader GL type approach to this, which perhaps we can think about. Although there is an aircraft exclusion, we could take that offline and perhaps hear the situation that Simon's talking about. So that's a broad answer, but the long and the short of it is no, unfortunately, not what we do.
Great.
Right.
So the lucky draw, if you guys saw it came up on your screens, it's Dave Hopcroft. So Dave, I'm not sure if you're still on. We just want to say hi, you're the lucky winner of this lovely book. And we'll make sure to get it to you. Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Dave is one of our long-lived participants since our very first iTOOsday. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Yeah, it pays to join these things. I keep winning prizes.
Exactly. It shows. If you attend, it's good.
Well,
thank you so much.
Congrats.
Cool. And then we look forward to seeing you guys next week. We're going to be talking a bit more about the mines and drones and how they fit into that industry. So we're very excited about that session, and we hope to learn as much as we did in this session. So once again, thank you, Grant. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Kopano. Thank you so much, Greg, for your time. And thank you, everyone else. Just quickly, if you guys want to say a quick bye, put on your cameras, wave to us, unmute yourselves. Everyone's welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy, and all the others.
Bye, Crane. Lovely seeing you.
Yeah.